charge. That's right. So he has a lot of experience. Accountant by profession. He worked at PwC before that. So when he got this job, he knew what he was getting into. Or did he? We're going to ask Mbuvi Ngunze, 47-year-old CEO of KQ, the tough questions tonight. His Twitter handle is @Kenya Airways. Kenya Airways is one word. Mine is @Koinange Jeff. The hashtag we want to use tonight, Kenya Airways. Sit back. It's time to ask whether the pride of Africa is still just that. Mbuvi, good to see you, brother.
Very good to see you.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Young CEO in a lot of trouble. I guess the most obvious question, Mbuvi, is did you see this coming? You were CEO for 3 years. Did you see the mess coming?
COO.
You were CEO for 3 years before CEO. Did you see it coming?
Is it a mess, Jeff?
Oh, you tell me. You guys are hemorrhaging.
I think it's important to contextualize everything. We're in a difficult time. And in the aviation industry, this is not unusual. In the context of Kenya, it is huge, and no denying. But when you look at it from a global perspective, which we are, if you think about Kenya Airways, we are the largest multinational out of Kenya with a footprint. You know, there are many other companies that are larger than KQ, but from a footprint point of view, we're the largest multinational. And in aviation space today, if you just backpedal a couple of years, we've seen very many other companies that have gone through the kind of troubles we are going through. The question is, how do you extricate yourself from that?
So you're saying you're not in trouble. That's what you're saying. 25 billion in the red, you're not in trouble.
We're in trouble to an extent because obviously the bets we took from a capacity point of view have not manifested themselves in terms of passengers and revenue, but there's still a significant opportunity there. You know, when you said used to be the pride of Africa, I want to correct you. We are the pride of Africa,
well,
and we will still stand strong in the future.
Okay. In most companies or people in your position, if something like this happened, the first thing they would do is resign. Why not just walk away, Mbuvi? You've only been there a year, CEO or less. Resign.
Jeff, what wakes me up every morning is actually what is at the core purpose of Kenya Airways. The core purpose of Kenya Airways is actually towards the sustainable development of Africa. I truly believe in what KQ does. KQ makes a huge difference across Africa. Every place that we touch, you know, recently there was a problem in Bujumbura. We pulled out for a week or two. I tell you, it was difficult. We were being asked to get back sooner because, you know, the economy landlocked. Of course, they're deep in trouble. How'd you get back? FNA in Sierra Leone, Liberia, Monrovia, we had to step away because Kenyans became experts at Ebola and it was very difficult to continue sustaining our flights. Of course, there were risk factors, but the World Health Organization had said, you know, you can continue flying. Those economies took a big hit. Our going back and our supporting those economies is a very strong manifestation of actually what we do, what sort of differences we make. And I can go on and on, Jeff. And I think the footprint across Africa, 60% of our revenue is generated across Africa. And I see the difference we make to African economies day by day.
Are you back in those three countries, Mbuvi?
We are back in Monrovia, that's Liberia, and Freetown, Sierra Leone.
Bujumbura, not yet.
Bujumbura, we are flying. Yes, we are back.
Okay.
Yes.
So the question a lot of people have been asking is, what was the biggest source of the hemorrhaging? Was it the planes that were bought? What was it?
We've got to contextualize it, Jeff, as I said. If I look at, you're referring, I guess, to the results, the recently announced financial results.
Yeah.
So in very broad terms, we had a capacity increase plan. And this year alone, the past year up to March, we had an increase of 8% growth in capacity. That wasn't matched by the revenue growth, meaning that actually the passenger numbers, even though they increased, the prices actually went down. So we moved from 3.7 million passengers to 4.2 million passengers. At the same time, our yield, which is the effective average price, went down 11%. So the net effect was revenues were flat. But on the cost side, of course, because of the capacity increase, your cost went up because of fuel, because of operating costs and all. Revenues flat, capacity increase, yield down. that results in incremental cost. Fleet costs, of course, were significant, but that's not it only. We made a decision last year to retire 4 of our 777-200 aircraft, older aircraft, because after the first half year, on the back of results that we were not seeing, particularly on the back of all the travel advisories into Kenya and all, and remember, aircrafts are ordered 4 years in advance, so you're taking punts well ahead. So when we decided to cut back capacity, from an accounting point of view, you have to take certain hits. If you make a decision to sell an aircraft today, you have to write down that value to what is a market value. Just like when you drive a car out of a garage, it means that the value depreciates. So we had to take about a 5.7 billion hit in relation to asset write down. In addition to that, any spares attached to that, we had to take a write down. And then we had a big non-cash impact of fuel hedging. If you remember, fuel prices were fairly in the 80s and 90s up to October last year. Then suddenly they took a nosedive. So the second half of the year, even though we were hedged forward, we ended up taking a hedge impact of about almost $6 billion. So huge money. I mean, and we're not the only ones. If you go internationally, other airlines also face the same challenge in terms of hedges. So we're not the only ones who are writing down our hedges. Other airlines, Ryanair, Delta, KLM, Air France, and similar airlines also did. But significant in the context of Kenya.
Right. Did terrorism have anything to do with loads being lighter?
You're spot on, Jeff. The security situation in Kenya has meant, for example, that the last high of tourist arrivals in Kenya was 2011. Those are statistics from Kenya Tourism Board. We've seen a reduction of tourists down somewhere like 500,000 so far, 500,000 year on year. And I think if I give you an example, London, Mombasa, which is a big flow for us, is down close to 30-35% year on year. I mean, those are huge flows. When we see the impact from North America, the flows from North America, when we see the reduction out of Australia or Japan, they're smaller numbers, but they're significant.
Yeah.
So travel advisories coming from the terrorism in the region and all that has had definitely a strong impact.
I remember you testified in front of the Senate committee a few times. They keep calling you. And then the government stepped in and said they were going to give you 4 billion shillings. Something like that?
Well, the government talked about the support that they would give the airline. So as part of shareholder loans, because in the process in the last year we've needed some credit while we were organizing the broader bridging financing that we had been talking about. So we borrowed 4.2 billion Kenya shillings from the government on short-term loan. At the same time, from a long-term debt perspective, what we are talking about is that as part of our turnaround, we have 3 things that we have to do. The first thing, which we started this year, was that we, having anticipated in November when I took over that we would need some bridging money, we went out into the market to look for about $200 million worth of bridging finance. And we retained Afri-Exim, which is the largest Exim bank in Africa, in that process. And that was the first part. The bridge was to give us a breathing space to allow us to recapitalize the business. So the next part of the conversation is to say what equity into the business in terms of bringing back the equity structure at the right level and what long-term debt in the business. So the government will get involved probably in the equity part as a shareholder, and we have to have the detailed discussion on that and probably give some undertakings on some of the long-term debt, and we're having conversation about that.
Yeah.
So it's not actually the government giving 40 billion,
Right.
but it's about how they get involved in the structuring, because the debt market can support that.
Yeah. Any layoffs?
There will have to be some reorganization along the way, Jeff. I think the reality of our business is that we've got to keep on fine-tuning. What I'm focused on today, as a fact, is around productivity. We took some layoffs 2 years ago. We've had some limited reorganization recently, but there are no promises in life. We have to tighten. We have some productivity work to do. I keep on talking about productivity. We've had good success on productivity with the cabin crew and the ground services union, where we now pay, particularly on the cabin crew side, on the basis of labor worked, so that's productive hours, as opposed to before where we were paying a fixed allowance. And we have seen the behavior change. We have the same conversation we're having with the pilots union. It's been a tough conversation. You've probably caught wind of some of it.
Yep.
The important thing for me is that we as an international company have to come back to an international benchmark. Today, and it's not a secret, we are somewhere around 20% lower in terms of productivity for some of our productivity in terms of labor hours for pilots than international benchmark. It costs me money. There'll be other areas where we've got to tighten, definitely.
Yeah. You know, truth be told, KQ pilots, and I've flown KQ the last 20 years or so, KQ pilots are some of the best in the world, no doubt.
They are.
No doubt about it. You know, great captains, great crew. And by the way, I was cabin crew one time, so if I was cabin crew today, Mbuvi, would I be worried about my job security?
I tell everybody, focus. Keep focused. Work 150% because bidii yako itakuokoa. That's a reality. There are no guarantees in life. Is there a guarantee for me in my job? No. We've just got to work hard. This company is important to the economy of Kenya. So we've got to prove our mettle around what we need to do.
Yeah. When you left Lafarge, did you think you were going to go from the out of the frying pan into the fire?
Is that like literally? There's some alignment in terms of when you compare Lafarge and KQ. I say alignment because, these are all process industries. Beyond the glamour of the front, in the flights and what you see, because you see the service side, there's a lot of process work that goes on behind the scenes. And maybe one day I should invite you to do some behind the scenes work.
I'd love to.
Because then you would see how much effort goes in. You only meet some of the frontline staff, the people who check you in, the people who make sure you get on board, the people who welcome you on board, the crew on board. But behind the scenes, there's a whole array of people who are actually making sure every process works. Cement was the same in terms of just making sure processes work. I guess for me the biggest difference, aviation versus cement, is the level of regulation in the industry. It's really super high, and for good reasons, because you rely, when you're up there, you want to make sure those birds are flying correctly. The second point is that you actually see the impact of the customer very quickly. And it's really an important thing, because our promise to you, who is flying, our guest, is our on-time performance and our regularity and our consistency. It's very visible, and the service is very visible.
What's the workforce numbers at KQ?
We have 4,000 direct staff, just under 4,000 direct staff, and we have another close to 800-900 indirect.
So if you were to cut the fat, what are we talking? A couple of hundred, 500, 1,000, a third?
I would be speculating, Jeff.
Well, you speculated on fuel and you got that wrong.
I don't want to speculate on that, because I think we've got to go step by step.
Tough days ahead?
No, tough days ahead. We've had tough conversations. We already are having those tough conversations. It's not been easy. Remember, the results we were releasing were from March 31st.
So there's more coming.
We've been working hard to make sure that this business is actually resilient. And by the way, Jeff, every day we are successfully transporting across the region, across Africa, across the world, between 10 and 12,000 people, 160 flights a day. We are still in operation in tough times, which is no mean feat.
Sure. You're going to stay in operation? Are we going to have this conversation a year from now? Will you still be in operation?
By God's grace, we will.
Worst case scenario?
Jeff, I don't want to look at the pessimistic side. Maybe if I broaden the conversation, which is probably important, is to understand why is KQ what it is, and what does KQ mean? If I look at it to the economy of Kenya, if I look at it to the broader economy, there are important aspects of KQ. KQ provides connectivity. Kenya punches above its weight in international capitals, partly because of the connectivity that KQ provides for it. Even higher than Joburg, higher than Lagos, which are two large capitals in terms of connectivity relative to GDP. That's number one. Number two, today, very many multinationals position themselves in Kenya, not only because of the weather, that too, but because of the kind of connectivity we have with the region. If I think of East African cooperation, we are well ahead of governments from an integration point of view, because we've been connecting this region for a long time. If I think of taxes and other contributory parts to this economy, over the last 10, 15 years, we've paid over 67 billion Kenya shillings worth of taxes to the government of Kenya. If I include the region, Uganda, Tanzania, if you just talk about that macro economy, employment, directly, indirectly, significant. If you think about the contribution, I mean, we are borrowing from banks here, we're contributing to this economy, banks have been very supportive to us. So I think we are an important part, and not only KQ, I think aviation sector, if I just broaden it, aviation sector, 10% of GDP. That's significant.
That's good, Mbuvi. I want to talk more about that after the break. And also, ticket prices. Ticket prices. We all complain. KQ is one of the most expensive airlines when it comes to buying a ticket. I can buy a ticket on ET or Qatar or Emirates, which will be, a third of the price of KQ. Why is that?
Where are you going to?
I'll tell you right now. We'll take a break and I'll tell you. And also, moving forward, I mean, any regrets about leaving, the cement people?
In life, you've got to take your chances and move on.
Take your chances and move on, says Mbuvi Ngunze. He is the CEO of KQ right now. Right now, that is. We're going to take a break. Keep tweeting at Kenya Airways, at Koinange Jeff. The hashtag we're using tonight is Kenya Airways. Jeff Koinange Live takes a break. We'll be back in a moment. Okay. Ni moto sana.